Now, please welcome your MC for the evening, the founder of NextGen America, Tom Steyer.
So, I want to thank you guys for braving the tornado to make it here tonight. I know it wasn't easy, and I can look outside and see it's still pouring, so thank you very much for coming to Keeping Up with the Candidates fundraiser for Virginia-10 to unseat Barbara Comstock. At NextGen America, the #1 thing that we're focused on in 2018 is flipping the House. And Virginia-10 has been rated the most likely to flip House seat. So we have 5 candidates here tonight who are running in the Democratic primary, and we actually have some super outstanding candidates. I think it's a reflection of the passion that we're seeing on the Democratic side, that really fantastic people are running across the country, and very specifically running in Virginia. At NextGen America, what we are focused on more than anything else is talking to young voters. We've been in Virginia since 2014. We spent a ton of time in Virginia on the state elections in 2017 when we registered over 20,000 young voters, and the turnout by people under 35 went up by 32%. So we believe that young Americans, young Virginians can change the world in 2018, and will. What we're trying to do is frame these elections around issues, things like educational affordability, healthcare, LGBT rights, but we also want to have a lot of fun. Our watchword is fun and productive. And that's what we're going to try and get to do tonight. We're going to try and let you get to know the candidates, understand their policy positions, but also give you some sense of what they're like as people. And that means it's going to be more informal than what you might see in a normal debate. For instance, I know that this is a smaller audience than we'd have if we didn't have a tornado, but that means that we're going to really encourage you to participate. We'd love for you to show how you feel about answers, whether they're good or bad. I'd like you to keep it within the bounds of propriety if you could manage to do that. But we are also encouraging you, if you want to ask questions, please tweet us your questions using YouthVote hashtag. And if you want to send us videos or photos using YouthVote hashtag, then we'll spread them around too. So before we start, I want to give you a couple of the rules of the road. We're asking the candidates, as they know, not to address each other. And if they do, because then it would get into a much longer debate. So we're asking them just to answer the questions, and if they do address each other, we're going to use a very loud buzzer. Could we hear the buzzer, please? Okay. We are also having, because we have 5 candidates and a whole bunch of questions with hopefully very short answers, we're going to enforce the time limit on those answers with that exact same buzzer. If you go too long, you'll get a buzzer. And lastly, let me say this. Tonight is a fundraiser. The money we raise is going to CASA in Action. They do fantastic work. They're very grateful for the work that you've done. And now I'd like our statewide coordinator, Carter Black, to come up here and explain what people can do to get involved in this election specifically.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Tom, so much for the warm welcome. I actually grew up in the 10th district, so I can say tonight that it's good to be home. I grew up across the mountain in Virginia, or in Winchester, Virginia, so it's great to share this event with you all, and ahead of such an important election. We're really excited to have our candidates. And before we get to the main event, and hear from our candidates, I just wanted to talk very briefly about our program here in Virginia and what we're doing on the ground. So after you've heard from our candidates and you're really excited to get involved, you know exactly how to do that. So Tom spoke a little bit about what our program did last fall, and it's great to be in NextGen Virginia because we've been here since last summer on the ground, on college campuses, in communities in Virginia, already doing this work. Last fall alone, we knocked over 200,000 doors. We registered 21,000 young people to vote across the Commonwealth. And one of my favorite statistics is that our campus teams engaged over 1,700 of their fellow students to do that work with us. So it was really a team effort. And the best part is that we have not stopped at all. We've been here the whole time. We've been here this spring. This spring we're active on 17 college campuses across the Commonwealth, doing things like establishing clubs on our campuses and holding voter registration events. And we also we surveyed over 6,000 fellow young people on issues that they care about, like student debt and gun control and healthcare. So we've been really active this entire time. It's only going to get crazier from here on. And I just wanted to say I'm standing up here today because when I was a student at James Madison University, where I graduated in 2016, somebody came up to me when I was a senior and they told me that I could make a difference and use my voice to do something good. And I'm still doing it, so it worked, and that's exactly what we're trying to do. So if you are in this audience, if you are watching on our Facebook live stream right now, and you are a high school student, and you are going to be on a college campus in Virginia this fall, we're probably on your campus. Come find us. And if you're a parent in this audience, I know that we have some parents here today, we're probably on your son or daughter's college campus. Come find us. You can go home tonight and tell them all about the new club that they're going to join in the fall. So I'm really, really, really excited to be here. I'm excited to share the stage sort of with all of our candidates and with Tom. After our event, we're going to have some people walking around with iPads. Please find us, ask us how we can get involved, tell your kids to come find us. That's really all I have to say. Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you, Carter. And let's have our candidates come up and let's get going. Let's get started. Our program has 4 parts: candidate introductions, rapid fire questions, moderated Q&A, and to end, a candidate free time. Candidate introductions, you have 2 minutes apiece. There's no addressing your fellow candidates. And Julia, why don't you start?
Hi everyone, my name is Julia Biggins, and I just want to thank Next Generation America so much for having us be here and speak with you tonight. So I am one of the candidates running for Congress this year, not only to unseat Barbara Comstock, but also to fight for science, because I am an infectious disease scientist, and for as long as I can remember, I've been interested in solving complex problems and helping other people. So I think that led naturally to me going to graduate school after college and receiving a PhD in molecular virology, where I wrote my dissertation on HIV transmission. And then following that, I went to lead a team at USAMRIID up at Fort Detrick, where we worked on the Ebola virus. We developed vaccines and therapies there, and some of our work was used in 2014 to help the infected individuals. And so for the last 20 years or so, I've spent my career developing vaccines and cures for some of the world's most dangerous and deadly pathogens. And as a scientist, I have been very transparent with my data, open and honest with sharing, working with my colleagues, and peer reviewing the work of my other scientists. And so in short, as a scientist, I acted as I expect our elected officials to act. But unfortunately, we're not governed by scientists yet. So what we are governed by is this professional political class made up of lawyers, lobbyists, political operatives who are dismissive of data, afraid of transparency, and more interested in saying the right thing than doing the right thing. And that's why I'm running for Congress, to do the right thing. Last night, Our Revolution endorsed my campaign because they understand that our campaign is looking to the future. We are in favor of single-payer healthcare, protecting our environment, and making affordable education. And so I look forward to answering your questions tonight and having a lot of fun.
My name's Allison Friedman, and I know that climate change is real, and despite what this administration and Congress would have you believe, that facts, expertise, and experience are critical to governing. I believe that love is love, that we can make healthcare and education affordable and accessible, that Black lives, America's word, and diplomacy matters, that deporting kids who have done nothing wrong is wrong, and pardoning and then praising a sheriff who has done everything wrong is fundamentally un-American and goes against rule of law. I know that Russia interfered in our elections and needs to be held accountable, and I believe and have been a part of government doing good things to help people. I'm a first-time candidate, but this isn't my first time standing up to abuses of power. Whether it was voting rights or bad judges or combating human trafficking all around the world and here at home, I've stood up to abuses of power, taken on problems that others had written off as intractable, and I've won. I believe in the genius of checks and balances. Our framers believed that we might one day have an unfit tyrant in the White House. What they didn't count on was a Congress without the courage to hold him accountable. And our Congresswoman, Barbara Comstock, has been particularly empowering and emboldening of this abuse of power. I am running to bring courage back to Congress. Thank you.
My name is Dan Helmer. I'm so excited to be here today. A little bit about myself and why I'm running for Congress. I'm a West Point graduate and Rhodes Scholar, the son of an immigrant and the grandson of refugees. Father of 2 boys, husband to an amazing public school teacher. I've served combat tours in Iraq and Afghanistan, where I was awarded the Bronze Star. In the private sector, worked with the Department of Veterans Affairs as a project leader on a team that found $1 billion in savings we could redirect towards our veterans. And after DC insiders, local elected officials, and people who just moved to the district have lost 5 times in a row to Barbara Comstock, I'd offer them the best chance we have to finally beat her in November. Because I can offer the starkest contrast between her service to special interest and my service to our country. But it's not just about winning in November. It's about having the courage to fight for our progressive values after you win. And I will. I've seen firsthand the consequences of Washington cowardice. It's inscribed on the headstones of my friend. And as someone who's carried an assault rifle in the deserts of Iraq and the hills of Afghanistan, I'm ready to fight the NRA so the weapons of war I carried have no place in our streets or in our schools. Yet we can't take on the NRA or get to universal health care unless we take on the special interests that dominate Washington today. So I've taken a pledge. I will never accept a dime of corporate PAC money. And finally, after 9/11, the worst threat to our democracy lived in a cave. Now he lives in the White House. And I'm ready to vote to impeach him to defend our democracy. I'm ready to go to Washington, be part of a new generation of leaders who put country before party, service before self, and people before politics, who fight for us. Because that's what I've been doing all my life, and I hope you'll join me. Looking forward to your questions. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. Tom, thanks for being here. My name is Paul Pelletier, and I've knocked on a lot of doors in Virginia's 10th district. And before people tell me that they can't wait till Barbara Comstock is driven out of office, before they talk to me about this crazy president that we have that's driving our country into the ground, before they tell me about school safety, before they tell me about their tax problems, the one thing invariably everybody says to me is my government is broken. It's not working for me. That we're not holding people accountable. And I'm sick and tired of establishment partisan politics. And I agree, I think it's been a long time since government has worked for us. You know, as a federal prosecutor for almost 3 decades, I actually know what good government looks like. For each and every day of my career, I fought a nonpartisan battle just to do what's right and to take on and hold accountable people who did wrong. Now, that's why I'm running for Congress, because I want to end the era of broken government. Now, for as long as I can remember, I just wanted to be passionate and do what's right for our country. I never dreamed I'd be a politician, but I just couldn't stand around any longer as these incompetent con men in Washington drove our country into the ground. So I wanted to make a difference, and I wanted to stand up against that. So what did I do? I fought white-collar crime. I fought healthcare fraud. I fought Drugs. I fought con men. As a matter of fact, the last con man I fought is doing 112 years in jail. And that's what I want to do, is I want to fight for you. And I've done that all my life. I've had the courage and experience to do it. And if you vote for me, I promise I'll do it for you. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Lindsay Davis Stover, and thank you so much for being here tonight. Thank you for hosting the event, because this is one of the most important districts in the entire country. And we have a congresswoman right now who has a 97% voting record with Donald Trump, who's bought and paid for to the tune of $137,000 by the NRA. A congresswoman who always chooses large corporations over our families and our communities. In fact, the latest tax bill is a great example. You know, we can talk about the impacts of the tax bill, but it's another thing entirely to have lived it. And I've lived it. I was raised by a single mom. I got my first job when I was 14 to help pay for a phone bill and to help save for the chance for me to go to college. I know what it's like to charge groceries because you can't afford to pay for them otherwise. In fact, I'm still paying off over $80,000 worth of student loans. If Donald Trump had been my president and Barbara Comstock would have been my congresswoman growing up, a family like mine wouldn't have had the opportunities that I had. I wouldn't have had the opportunity to go to college, to go to graduate school at Harvard, to serve in AmeriCorps Vista, as some of you may know as the Domestic Peace Corps, to be a chief of staff on Capitol Hill and work on some life-changing legislation for working families, for students, and for veterans, and to have a chance to be a senior advisor in the Obama administration working on veterans policy, and now a small business owner and raising my 2 daughters, and hopefully giving them a few more chances than I had growing up. This is such an important election, and I have the lived experience and the work experience to go head-to-head with Barbara Comstock and win. And I look forward to working with all of you to do just that. Thank you.
Wow. I said that we had 5 great candidates here today, and we really have 5 great candidates. So the next thing we're going to do are rapid fire questions. I'm going to go down the line and ask each of you, please keep your answers really short, like approximately 1 word. We'll start each one with a different person so that no one has to go first or last every time. Julia, why don't we start with you? If you could have one superpower, what would it be?
Invisibility.
To fly.
Definitely to fly.
To cure cancer.
To be in 2 places at once.
Okay, Allison, Virginia has produced some notable historical figures. Who is your favorite?
Barbara Johns.
Jefferson.
Jefferson.
Barbara Johns, definitely.
Jefferson.
Okay, Dan. Obviously, a number of your staff is in the audience here tonight. What would be the 3 adjectives your campaign manager would privately use to describe you? Try to be accurate here.
I know, Bonnie, you're gonna keep me to account on this one. Passionate, driven, and whatever adjective you would use to say, don't sleep enough to give her the time she needs to get her work done.
He would use another word, but I would use thrifty. The other word would be passionate and caring, and the third word would be, hopefully, humorous.
Punctual, empathetic, and detail-oriented.
I think it would be passionate, hands-on, and dedicated.
I think it would be honorable, anxious, and kind.
Paul. Tyson's or Fair Oaks Mall?
Oh, Tyson's.
Tyson's.
Fair Oaks.
Tyson's.
Come on, neither of them is in Virginia 10.
I take that as your answer.
Yes.
Target, though, much more.
Okay, Lindsay, what's your Starbucks order?
Non-fat latte.
When I go there, tall, skinny caramel macchiato.
This is so embarrassing. Vanilla steamed milk.
I told you were going to get to know the candidates.
Either a black coffee or a skinny caramel macchiato. We go both ends of the spectrum.
Grande, pike, room for skim.
Okay, Julia, we're back to you. Best thing to listen to in traffic?
Heavy traffic?
Heavy metal? Heavy traffic?
No, heavy traffic, something with a good beat, like techno.
My kid.
The Revolutions podcast.
Warren Zevon.
Pod Save America.
Okay, we're now moving to straight yes or no questions. And the way that we're going to do this is we're going to, a yes, if you have a yes, raise your hand. If you have a no, just don't raise your hand. So, and if the audience, if you feel compelled to add your opinion, please raise or do not raise your hands. For instance, a question would be, do you think the moderator is doing a fantastic job tonight? Oh, what a great audience. Okay, you ready? So we have, let's just see how many. We're gonna have 12 questions. First one, support a woman's right to choose. Support a national paid family leave policy. Support employer-mandated contraception coverage. Support allowing transgender soldiers to serve in the military. Raise your hand if you refuse to take corporate PAC money. PACs are saving a lot of money tonight. Would have opposed the Republican tax plan had you been in Congress at the time. Would oppose all tax breaks to large corporations or millionaires. Support raising the minimum wage. Think Donald Trump is not fit for office. Support regulating carbon emissions from power plants. Support the goal of transitioning to 100% clean energy by 2050. Okay, that's our lightning round. We are now going to what we call moderated Q&A, which includes questions submitted from audience members and the public. And all of you will get a chance to answer every question, but we're going to do the exact same thing that we did at first, which is have a different order each time so no one has to go first or last every time. You're going to have 1 minute to respond, and if for any reason I ask a follow-up question, which seems to be unlikely, you will have an additional 30 seconds to do that. So first question, Julia, we'll start with you again. Young people are increasingly distrustful of their elected officials and want leaders that are authentic and will do what they think is right rather than what is politically correct. Why are you the best candidate to represent young people in Congress?
So what you said, Tom, is exactly why I am running for office. What we see are current elected officials that are more interested in special interest or the largest donors. I'm interested in neither, as both a candidate and a person in Congress. I've spent my entire campaign, this district is very large. I've been here, I've been in Winchester, Leesburg, I live in Manassas. I am getting to know the voters and their issues, because if I'm asking for your vote, I want to be your true representative in every sense of the word, and that I will take your agenda with me to Congress. With my professional background as a scientist, I think we're the perfect public servants. We do work for the greater good, we answer questions for the greater knowledge, and within the infectious disease space where I am, we are solving diseases and finding cures and vaccines for things that exist in the most vulnerable populations, not for the wealthiest few. And so I put forth that scientists are also the perfect public servant.
I my first job was as a student coordinator on a campaign. I'm the first person in this race to hold a student roundtable on the issue of gun violence. I have spent my entire career standing up to those abuses of power that I think make young people, and frankly, a lot of other people, lose faith in government. And I think my experience working at the nexus of policy, politics, and the possible to get big things done out of government will help bring faith back. Now, because I have 26 seconds left, I want to clarify why I kept my hand down. I think right now our tax incentive system hurts expanding opportunity to all people. I think there are some tax incentives that could be used for corporations to help make education and worker retraining more affordable, and I think I want to keep that option on the table.
So this is a country that welcomed my family as immigrants, as refugees, Holocaust survivors, my grandparents. I grew up knowing that my entire life, known that that's worth defending for my family and others. I care so much about it that I'm willing to put my life on the line for it. Not only did I serve 11 years on active duty, but still today I'm a Lieutenant Colonel in the U.S. Army Reserves. So I know that this country is worth fighting for. I've been willing to die for it if need be. And when it comes to the loss of trust that we have in our politics, it's because too often our politicians are putting the next election ahead of what they do in between elections. And I think in order to change that, we are going to need a new generation of folks, young people like us, who are ready to put country before party and service before self and people before politics and change the way that business gets done. I'm ready to run and bring a new set of perspectives and fresh ideas to Congress, and I think that's what we need to motivate not just young people, but all the people that lost so much trust in our government, they're willing to put a guy like Donald Trump in the office. Thank you.
Thank you. You heard my opening statement. I agree that government is broken, and I think it hasn't served the public interest for a long time. I think that's why Donald Trump is president, by the way. I think people were fed up with partisan politics and people yelling and screaming at each other constantly and not getting anything done. And it's still going on. I was a public servant for 30 years. Every day that I came to work for one thing, and that was to do what was right for the public. And that's why kids should vote for me, because I know no other way. I would never, ever, ever not do public service. And, you know, when kids were marching on Washington, marching for our lives, because congressmen and congresswomen weren't acting on their behalf, I said to myself, we can't be that way. I would never be that way. I would do it for them and only them. Thank you.
Young people are serving as the conscience of our nation right now. And thank God they are, quite honestly. They're leading on issues like reducing gun violence and making college more affordable. I'm proud to be a candidate of distinction from Moms Demand Action and endorsed by the Pride Fund to end gun violence. Because the idea that this issue is too complicated for Washington to do anything about is absolutely outrageous. At the very least, our kids and our students need to be able to go to school and feel safe. And we've been working with students all across this district, literally in every inch of this district. And I look forward to continue to working with young people in Congress on important issues like reducing gun violence and making college more affordable. I too, as said before, have over $80,000 worth of student loans. We have to make it easier for students to be able to go to college and create opportunities for themselves.
Okay, next question to start with Allison. Healthcare costs for many Virginians is a cause for concern. Republicans in Washington spent a large part of 2017 trying to repeal the Affordable Care Act. What would you do to lower out-of-pocket costs, including premiums and co-pays?
Look, I believe healthcare is a fundamental right, and that means it has to be affordable and accessible. And I have said from the outset, I have three basic questions on healthcare reform. How will it affect people? How much will it cost? And what's the process of getting there? I do think the corrosive influence of special interests on healthcare have made it impossibly expensive. And so first, I would stand up to Big Pharma, and I think it's important to note how much money Congresswoman Comstock has taken from Big Pharma. We have to reduce prescription drug costs, and we can negotiate those. I'm also supporting a Medicare opt-in option, which means that if you can't get the health care that you like on the exchanges, that you can access another option, which I think will also drive down healthcare costs.
This is an incredibly important issue. I had an amazing chance to work at the largest integrated healthcare provider in the country. And we're focused on identifying cost savings, real opportunities to reduce costs. And there are real opportunities that we're not taking advantage of right now. So right now, and I also, by the way, support a Medicare for All option that would allow any American to opt into Medicare that chose to. But right now, we are not negotiating the prices of drugs through Medicare Part D nationally. So we have an opportunity to actually unleash the ability of the government to buy drugs at a cheaper cost. And because we're not doing that, we're sometimes paying 5 times, 10 times, even 200 times what other countries pay for that. So we need to unleash the ability to negotiate drug prices, and we need to make sure that we are actually putting pressure on insurance companies to make sure they're actually covering Americans' real costs, covering not only regular health care, but mental health care and other issues that often are left in the coverage gap for many Americans, leaving them paying high out-of-pocket costs. And I think we're going to need legislators who are not willing to take corporate PAC money in order to stand up and fight for that as well.
I also agree that healthcare costs are too high in America, and it's not available to most people who really need it. I've done something about it. As a prosecutor, when I first started prosecuting healthcare fraud, it drove me crazy that we were letting billions, hundreds of billions out the door that went directly to fraudsters. In Miami, I created the first healthcare fraud strike force in the country, and in my first case, billings for infusion therapy went from $1 billion a year to 0. And the program I created was so effective, they asked me to create it across the country. And I put strike forces across the country that today save taxpayers tens of billions of dollars. And we need to do more, and I would do more. I would also reinstate the insurance mandate that this tax bill took away to help drive down premium prices, and I would pass a law, because we have a law that doesn't allow us to negotiate drug prices in Medicare. I would pass a law to reverse that, so we could in fact do that. Thank you.
I believe that health care isn't just a privilege for those who can afford it. I believe it's a right, and it's a right we shouldn't have to keep fighting for and marching for over and over and over again. The uncertainty of healthcare is making our premiums all go up. And in fact, the 2019 budget that Trump proposed has cuts to Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, and food stamps, all on the premise that ACA will be overturned. So the fight for healthcare is not over. And we saw in the latest tax bill, 14 million Americans' healthcare is now at risk with the passage of this tax bill. We have to ensure that we can provide health care that's affordable and accessible to all Americans. And we need to work to negotiate the drug cost prices down. I worked at the Department of Veterans Affairs. The Department of Veterans Affairs and the Department of Defense both negotiate drug prices at a lower cost. We need to ensure that Medicare can also do the same, so that over 50 million Americans will have the ability to have lower drug costs.
So my plan is a little different. I'm the only candidate in favor of the single-payer healthcare program that will give us universal healthcare for everyone and in an affordable manner. And I think that we're long overdue for moving in this direction for so many reasons. If we have that single-payer program, it will be a boost to the economy, because the burden of the payments will be lifted out of our employers. We can also focus on having standards of care more standardized across the country, so that a heart surgery doesn't cost more in Kansas than it does in Los Angeles or something like that. And also, I think a focus of my healthcare program would be preventative healthcare. I think as the infectious disease scientist, I understand how important it is to catch diseases and disorders early, and so that we will be having a more well population, because those options at the end of life are more costly and more limited. And so I think a preventative approach is definitely needed, and we'll also, under a single payer program, be able to negotiate those drug prices that are too exorbitant right now.
Dan, Virginia went through a terrible tragedy recently in Charlottesville. What can we do to eliminate racism in our communities, and is there a role for the federal government in that endeavor?
Absolutely. I mean, it starts at the top, right? We have a president who doesn't know which side the extremists are on, who throughout his campaign set up, made it okay to call folks who come into our country as immigrants to suggest that they themselves were perpetrators of massive amounts of crime, which is untrue. What it's going to require us to, one, hold this president accountable for his actions that have not only enabled a tragedy in Charlottesville, but also here in Virginia's 10th district have enabled the KKK, for instance, to go out and pass out flyers that they never felt empowered to do before. So I think it's about holding the president accountable. I think it's about making a bold statement. It's about having a real engagement with the community that says that we will not stand for racism, anti-Semitism. It doesn't matter who you love, where you come from, your zip code, where you were born. Each one of us deserves a fair shot at the American dream. That's worth fighting for.
And I agree that it starts at the top, and this president is a huge part of the problem in what he promotes, both in his tweets and in his policies. But I think we can do a better job in criminal justice reform to lessen the effects of racism. We all see what's going on out there in terms of if you're a minority, what happens to you in terms of the school to prison programs. When I say programs, I mean that's what's happening. Our kids, if they're minorities, are much more likely to end up in prison out of school and much more likely to get suspended from school simply because they're minorities. We need to do things to change the way we perceive minorities in this country. And I think that one of the most helpful trainings I've ever been as a prosecutor, and I think all police officers need to do this, is implicit bias training. And the federal government needs to pay for local police officers to go through implicit bias training. I think it is extremely helpful. And I would do a lot of things as it relates to prosecuting racial crimes and criminal justice reform. And I think that those are positive steps that we can take to help that problem.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree more. I think the tone is set at the top. And our country is at our best when we lead on issues like social justice and equality. And unfortunately, right now, we have a president who leads with hatred and justifies the hate going on in our country right now. And we need to have a strong Congress to keep this administration accountable and responsible for its actions. We do have a role to play in the federal government to lead by example and also not to justify the hate, whether it's criminal justice reform, making sure we eliminate mandatory minimum sentencing, or whether it's immigration. We've seen so much hate fueled in our immigration policy. And one example is this wall. Quite honestly, it's just stupid. El Paso, Texas is on the Texas-Mexico border. It's one of the safest cities in our entire country. This wall has absolutely nothing to do with security and everything to do with hate, and there is no room for hate in our country.
I definitely agree that, unfortunately, right now our president does not mirror the majority of this country's values. But I also think we need to start on the local level and make sure that our police are monitoring our neighborhoods in the best way possible. And by that I mean having police officers that come from the neighborhood, that are familiar with the community, that are getting out of their cars when they're patrolling, not just staying there, but actually interacting with the community they're supposed to be serving. And of course, within the police force, I think we need to be making sure we have the implicit bias training that goes on, and when the bad apples pop up, pull them out of the force, and if it's a force-wide, a systemic issue, then I think that would be an appropriate time for the federal government, for the Department of Justice to come in, as we saw in Ferguson, and kind of do some reform for those particular police departments. And I think further to that, the federal government can take one step forward to address criminal justice reform and the racism that we see there in terms of legalizing or decriminalizing marijuana, because we see that so disproportionately affecting our African American young men and women who are losing out on the economy when they're in jail.
Okay, two parts to this question. I have a lot to say on this. First, the federal government has a lot that it needs to do to stop the policy and real-life outcomes of racism, and that's true whether it's related to criminal justice reform or voting rights, or us watching Congresswoman Barbara Comstock sitting in between Paul Ryan and President Trump signing a bill that repeals a ban on discrimination and racial discrimination in auto lending. We are better than that, and we have to be better than that in our federal policy. And it's manifested in the district. I was knocking doors with a woman this weekend who said, you know, I see Hindus go home written under an overpass, and I'm scared to turn around in my car. But we can also build a better future that doesn't just deal with the outgrowth of racism, but actually provides the opportunity that right now isn't accessible to everyone.
Thank you. Paul, too many students graduate with massive amounts of debt. What would you do to help current and future students?
The first thing I would do is take care of Nick Mulvaney, who is in charge of the CFPB, and I would put an oversight flashlight up as you know what, because what we have going on here, he just disbanded the student portion of the CFPB that has literally returned over $70 million to students that was illegally taken from them by lenders. And he disbanded that, I believe, last week. So that's the first thing I would do. I would conduct legitimate oversight of the president and the executive branch. The second thing I would do is I would talk to schools about ways that they could reduce the burden of cost for these kids. We have kids coming out of schools with $300,000 in debt, $300,000, and they're being taught about jobs that don't even exist in this new economy. So we need to move on to the next question.
Well, first and foremost, we need to make education a priority in this country. The Trump budget has proposed a 10% cut right off the top of the Department of Education. It's proposed cuts to Pell Grants, Stafford student loans, and it's proposed a 50% cut to the work-study program. And I can tell you, as I was a student trying to cobble the funds together to go to school, for me it was a combination of taking the maximum amount of student loans, work-study program, working 3 minimum wage jobs, and I got a $1,000 check from my granddad. And had one of those pieces been missing for me, I probably wouldn't be on this stage right now. We have to make college more affordable, invest in loan programs at low interest rates for students to be able to go to school. I also believe in a national service loan repayment program. I, for one, served in AmeriCorps Vista, and I think there should be an opportunity for all students who want to give some time in national service to be able to repay their loans back through a national service program.
I too agree that education needs to be a priority. When you look at the 2017 budget, we see $900 billion going towards military funding and only $100 billion going towards our education. And I am 110% in support of our military, but I think that there are probably a few dollars there that we can reappropriate into our education system. And in terms of affordable college, I went to a public university, just recently finished paying off my own loans, and so I know how big of an expense this can be. And I think that when we look at the community college level, I'm in support of a civil service program, go your 2 years, and then give back your 2 years to your community or to a community in need based on your particular degree. And I also think we need to look at the way our loans are structured and making sure that the federal government is not allowed to profit from them, and that college students and college graduates are allowed to refinance their student loans. We're allowed to refinance auto loans and home loans based on new and good interest rates, and I think college students and college graduates deserve the same.
First, I would also oppose all of the cuts proposed in Trump's budget, and I do think both budgets and our tax bill are reflective of, not only our priorities, but what we believe investments will yield return. And I And I think we have, for too long, invested only in business and forgotten workers, families, and the on-ramp to opportunity that the tax bill can be. And I think if we added in incentives, credits, and refundable credits through meaningful tax reform so that people could actually not only go to college for the first time, but access training and retraining that we know will be increasingly necessary in this new economy, that would be critically important.
So education is absolutely critical. One of the things we saw in 2008 during the financial crisis is that the likelihood that you would lose a job was directly related to how much education you have. And we know that we have plenty of jobs in this country for which we don't have the educated workforce we need. And yet too many students are graduating saddled in debt and unable to repay the debts that they have. So I think there's a couple of things that we need to do nationally address. One, to address immediate needs of students today, and two, to address the needs of our economy and education long term. The first is I think we can actually make a relatively simple change to our tax code that would say that repayment of student debt to a worker is not treated as compensation, it's actually treated as a capital investment. That would give employers a significant incentive to quickly change the way in which they compensate students, more quickly pay off allow you to more quickly pay off a student loan, own a house earlier, save for retirement earlier. The second thing is I strongly believe in a national service program for every year of civil service or military service you did, you get 2 years of higher education paid for. I think that's what we need in this country.
Lindsay, you were just elected to Congress. You're in the Capitol on your first day and take the elevator to your new office. If you were stuck in the elevator with one Republican, who would it be and why? And let me say, anyone who steals my answer of Mitch McConnell just to keep him in the elevator for as long as possible, I will sue. Lindsay, go right ahead.
Goodness gracious, that's a good one. Mitch McConnell's a good answer.
I also would probably like to be in an elevator with John McCain. He has such a record of service, and while he would be on the Senate side, maybe we'd be in the joint elevator at the Capitol. But I'd love to hear his stories and learn from his experience and really just capture the years of service that he's given both in the military and in public service to our country.
You stole my answer. I was just thinking of any Republican in the House or the Senate. I think it would have to be John McCain. I mean, his name is fresh in my mind this week because of some of the comments made by the White House aide, which I think are just terrible, because regardless of your political party, John McCain is a true statesman. He has given his life to the service of our country when he was the prisoner of war, and I think we have a lot to learn from him, regardless of what party you're from. So I would really enjoy being stuck in an elevator with him.
Abraham Lincoln doesn't count. Yes.
If you can get him back, you can have him.
Senator Corker, I've worked with him a lot to combat human trafficking, and we disagree a lot on the social issues, but his willingness to work across the aisle and figure out a way to elevate the U.S. government's response to human trafficking at home and abroad, working with Democrats and Republicans, is something that I've admired and would enjoy catching up about.
So I was recruited to run for this seat by a bipartisan organization called New Politics. They've supported both Democrats and Republicans with a record of national service to run for office. And one of the Republicans they've supported is a Congressman, Mike Gallagher. And Mike and I, we definitely disagree on a lot of things, but we also agree on quite a bit. We agree that our politics in Washington haven't served the American people in the way they need. We agree that we need people who are just as willing to listen to one another as they are to yell about their positions. And we think there are real areas of opportunity for agreement on everything from drug price transparency to the way in which our politics are actually run in Washington. So I look forward to being stuck in an elevator with Mike. I look forward to being stuck in an elevator with others who share with me a belief that until we are willing to listen and hear what each other have to say, until we're willing to actually think through what are the solutions to our problems that can get large bipartisan support, yet still live by our values, that we can't move forward. So I look forward to be stuck in the elevator with him and any other Republican who's willing to cross the aisle and talk to one another to find good solutions for our problems.
Being stuck in an elevator with a Republican is the reason why I would ask for a first floor office. But the Republican I would like to, wouldn't mind being stuck in the office was Susan Collins. And the reason is, first of all, we could talk about the Red Sox. But the second reason would be because Susan Collins, I believe she's a true statesman. Stateswoman, I think is probably the best word to say. But she's someone who is willing, as Dan said, to reach across the aisle, to solve problems through reaching common ground solutions with people. When she voted against the destruction of the Affordable Care Act, it was a bold move, but she believed it was necessary. And that's the type of person that we need back in Congress. It's someone who actually finds common ground, actually has a heart, shares the values of her constituents, and just wants to do the right thing for American people.
Thank you. Julia, the Me Too movement has brought a lot of attention to the problems of sexual assault and harassment. How has the Me Too movement impacted you personally?
Let's see. I think that it has given me great hope moving forward, that we will come to a society where women are treated just as equally as men, and that we should have been there a long time ago, and that women are no longer afraid to stand up with a singular voice or with a group of women in any situation, whether it's in Hollywood, in the workplace, or even in science. I think we're standing up all over, and that's what we deserve to do moving forward. And I believe that it's not just a movement, but it's going to be what society in America is going to be like moving forward.
I think experiences with sexual harassment, at least, are a rite of passage for every professional woman. And the courage of women to come forward was inspiring and enraging, I think, in equal parts, that it is still where we are. And I can't help but think about the reality that it became such a story because it was powerful men who had more to lose, and there is so much more that still needs to be done to address the same kinds of abuses that happen in hotels and restaurants, and how to make sure that their courageous voices also lead to the reforms that are needed.
When Karen and I decided that we were going to run for Congress, it was in part a realization that this president, this Congress, represented the worst thing to befall women's progress in this country in at least a generation. And we saw a president get elected in spite of what seemed to be admissions to acts of sexual assault and many credible accusations by women. It was devastating. And yet the Me Too movement and the courage of the women who have come forward serves as a powerful counterpoint to a culture that too often has not believed the women, has not given women a fair voice for their complaints, has not protected them from recrimination at work. And it's just amazing for me personally to see that change and know that we, in a Democrat Congress, can give voice and make sure we put in place laws that reflect the courage of these women coming forward to make sure they are protected in the workplace, and all of us can feel safe in the places where we work and we live.
Thank you. Tom, I have 7 sisters, so I've been living the Me Too movement for a long time and have been aware of those issues. And it actually gave me a keen insight to the issues women face in the professional world. And as a prosecutor, especially as a supervising prosecutor, I saw in the legal field, especially in the prosecutorial field, how difficult it was for women both to achieve the success of men simply because they were women. So I made it a point, Tom, When I was a supervising prosecutor, I always had 2 deputies or more underneath me, and I would always make sure one of my deputies was a woman, because I thought it was extremely important to send the message to everyone that we were going to not only treat women equally in my business, in the prosecutorial business, but we were going to make sure that they were perceived as the equals and the supervisors that they should be. As in my business, it was all men supervisors when I got there. And that's what I did.
The day after the election, I was on my knees sobbing. And the first hard conversation I had to have was with my 2 little girls, because we hadn't elected a girl to the White House. But the second hard conversation I had to have was with myself, because we had elected a man who openly bragged about sexually assaulting women. And when I was in my early 20s, and I was in AmeriCorps, I went out for a jog, and I was actually attacked from behind. And quite honestly, I fought like hell and got away. And it was very clear what would have happened had I not gotten away. And there was only a few people in my life who knew that story. And the Me Too movement was so inspiring and gave courage to not just me, but so many women to tell their stories and to stand up for themselves and to stand up for other women. And I'm grateful to all the women who have stepped up along the way.
Allison, since the tragedy at Stoneman Douglas, young people have been leading the way to pass common sense gun control. What would you do to ensure that our schools, theaters, and other public spaces are safe from gun violence?
I believe I'm the first candidate in Virginia's history to launch my TV ad campaign with an ad entirely on gun violence prevention. That, and I have said that one of my priorities when I go to Congress will be earning an F from the NRA. I think we need I know we need universal background checks, ban on assault weapons, closing the gun show loophole, and a range of other reasonable reforms that fall where all of the country is. Instead, the NRA has managed to kind of create a debate by buying Congress that suggests that there are only 2 choices. Take everyone's guns away, or any gun, anytime, no matter what, no questions asked to anyone. That's wrong, and I will be a fierce voice against that in Congress.
So this one's deeply personal to me. My wife is a public school teacher. My 2 boys are in public schools. I've personally lost friends to bullets. These were folks who were in the military, and while it was devastating, we had signed up for it. My wife, our kids, the children in Stoneman Douglas, they didn't sign up for a war zone in their classrooms. And it's cowardice, pure cowardice in Washington, that's stopping us from passing meaningful gun legislation. I support the ban of assault weapons, the ban of high-capacity magazines. I support getting rid of the Dickey Amendment, which prevents scientific research. I think we need to put in place waiting periods when you buy a gun. We need red flag laws. There is a lot of meaningful legislation we can put in place right now that doesn't impinge on Second Amendment rights and make sure that our schools and our streets are safer, and I'm ready to fight for that in Congress.
You know, as a prosecutor, I took a lot of guns off the street, and I would continue to do that. But I would also spend, as a former hunter, I want to educate people that the .22 bullet that we hunted with is big different. There's a big difference between the .22 bullet that goes in an assault weapon. This is designed to kill people and only kill people. And we need to outlaw assault weapons. And the best way to do that is to find the common ground in America. And most, even hunters, think that assault weapons should be outlawed because they're not even good for hunting. So what we need to do is expose the NRA. And I would have hearings exposing the corruption of the NRA because they are a corrupt organization. They gave approximately $30 million, triple what they'd ever given to a presidential candidate. And it was all dark money. We don't know where that money came from. As the Russians were fating the leadership of the NRA, we need to expose what's going on there and prove how corrupt they are.
You said earlier that the students are really serving as the conscience of this country, and thank God they are, because our country, quite honestly, has failed students. The fact that I have a 6-year-old kindergartner who knows how to get into that corner over there and curl up in a ball and put her backpack over her head is heartbreaking. She should be worried about getting pizza on Fridays, not about a gunman in her classroom. I believe we have to have universal background checks. I believe that if you're too dangerous to board an airplane, you should be too dangerous to walk into a gun store and buy a gun. I believe that the same guns our soldiers use on the streets of Baghdad should never be used in the streets of our community. And I believe those who have a record of domestic violence should never be able to get their hands on a firearm. At the bare minimum, we have to ensure that our children feel safe going to school. We have a gun epidemic in this country. We're 5% of the world population, but we own over 40% of the world's guns. We have to ensure that our kids are safe, reduce homicides and suicides in this country.
So to the young people in this country, I want to say 2 things. First, I want to say thank you for standing up and leading the March for Our Lives and holding us adults accountable, getting us out there, speaking out loud, and fighting hard for this important issue. And secondly, I want to say I'm sorry that we adults haven't stood up like you have wanted us to and kept you safe in your schools and in your concert halls and in your homes. And so I agree that we need to get the most deadliest weapons off the street. We need to have the assault weapons ban bump stocks, all of those things. But until we figure out what is truly underlying this unique problem in this country, we will never solve the problem. And I think that the CDC is perfectly situated to do this research. They do that research on seatbelts, on heart disease, and other public health issues. And make no mistake, the gun violence in this country is a public health issue. And so I would be in favor of repealing the Dickey Amendment, giving funding to the CDC so that they can perform this research. And I also think something that we can do is a national gun buyback program so that we can get those deadliest weapons off the streets, no question asked, and just remove them right there.
So you guys, we are running out of time. So we have time for 2 more short questions and then for the final 2 minutes per candidate. So Dan, the first of the short questions, and if we can keep these to 30 seconds, that would be great. Donald Trump has attempted to phase out the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, or DACA program. Would you be willing to fund Trump's border wall or additional ICE agents in exchange for the DREAM Act?
So the quick answer is, since I got 30 seconds, although it's not coming up, the answer is there is nothing we can do worse than deporting Americans who came here as children. And if funding a stupid border wall, and it is an absolutely stupid border wall, is what it takes, then I'll do it. But I think we are better than that. I think if we put it to an open floor on the open vote on the floor of the House, and one of the worst things is Congresswoman Comstock won't stand with her brave Republican colleagues who have tried to do this, we can actually pass DACA deferment and make sure we can stay here. That wasn't fair. I didn't get to see it.
They're not giving you the number, but go ahead, Paul.
Yeah, the answer is no. And when I get to Congress, I believe that we're going to have a Democratic majority in Congress. And I believe there is enough people of good conscience that we can find common ground on this issue. In the Senate in 2013, they actually passed immigration reform which had a path to citizenship. So I believe if the Democrats are leading, that we can find common ground, because I believe most Americans want it, and I would work day and night to do it. I think we could.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think it's a compromise we have to make. We have to ensure that we're able to reverse Trump's decision on DACA. Over 800,000 children are affected by this policy who know no other home. And quite honestly, it's a horrible policy. It's human rights policy. And not only is it a heartless policy, Trump's decision to overturn DACA, but it's also a bad economic decision. We actually lose over $460 billion in economic growth in the next 10 years. And I believe it's a compromise we don't have to make.
Short answer is no. We should never, as Americans, play party politics when 800,000 lives hang in the balance. Never should we trade that for anything. And these are individuals that came to this country, as we said, as children, who don't know any other home. And so I would be in favor of, making sure DACA has its place and expanding it so that more individuals can be in this country safely and also have that clear path to citizenship. That's what we don't have right now. And I am completely against the wall that President Trump has put forth. It's a wall built out of hatred, not out of